after the morning session and did ask that he'd like to arrange a meeting where he can actually even get the minister to sit and have a meeting with Eko-Konnect and some other stakeholders about all of these issues surrounding education identity. And of course, we'll bring in the issue of persistent identifiers. So I'll sort of get started with my presentation, which is kind of titled Persistent Identifier Strategy for Africa. So I'll share my... Right, so I hope some of you may be familiar with LibSense. You probably can see the logo at the bottom right-hand screen. And although I work for Eko-Konnect, in this presentation, I'll sort of be wearing my LibSense hat because I do have a role within LibSense. But this presentation, I think, just wants to set the tone for the session in terms of a persistent identifier or PID strategy for Africa. But of course, I want to contextualize this for Nigeria. So I'll probably use Africa and Nigeria interchangeably in this presentation. So for those of you that don't know about LibSense, LibSense is a Pan-African program that was, I think it was started by the Western Central African Research and Education Network, WACREN, and it was really a program to bring library practitioners and NREN service providers together to engage in dialogue, advocacy, policy definition, and activities to promote open science across the continent. I know from our experience in Eko-Konnect, when we work with librarians and ICT practitioners, one of the things that we come across very often is that there seems to be an overlap, particularly with the growth of digital technology and online infrastructure. It seems that where does librarianship stop and technology starts? So you find that librarians want to have repositories deployed or library management systems deployed, and at some point the technical skills stop, and then they reach out to the ICT units to help them to deploy some applications or infrastructure. So the ICT guys kind of take over, and then they implement or deploy a solution. And then what happens is that in deploying these systems, the ICT people are sometimes not really aware of some of the identification infrastructure that needs to be integrated with the solutions that they deploy. So for them, as long as they've got it up and running on the network or in the cloud and it's working, hey, job done. And then sometimes the librarians themselves may not know and ill-equipped to address some of the issues with that deployed infrastructure, because it lacks many of the things that should make that infrastructure standardized to global standards. And then there tends to be some friction between the library and repository units and the ICT units about who owns and who manages the infrastructure, and then it just leads to a lot of other challenges. So LibSense was really about trying to get practitioners, both librarians, ICT people, and then NREM practitioners like Eko-Konnect and other NREMs, NGREM, and so on together to discuss these issues and also how we can promote the use of open science across Africa. There are 3 working groups. We tend to meet once a month. Each of the working groups has a monthly meeting to discuss various issues. And the working groups, there are 3. One is that covers policy. How do we develop and implement good open science and open access policies and other pertinent policies? Capacity building, what kind of training and workshops can we do, both physical and online, to advance the adoption of open science or develop campus-based open science communities, and infrastructure. What needs to be done to ensure that the correct open science infrastructure is available or is being adopted and being implemented properly. So these are really the goals, to implement interoperability of infrastructures and ensure that African outputs in terms of scholarly work, research work, is actually available globally. So why is there a need for an African PID strategy? I think I just touched on some of it in my introduction. Despite a lot of the efforts that have been going on for a number of years, the persistent identifier awareness is still very low among African researchers and librarians. And I would say, especially in Nigeria, it's quite low. Yes, some researchers know how to access certain infrastructure, but the understanding of what they're using is very low, and it's not really being utilized properly. We have journal platforms, repository platforms that are not properly consuming persistent identifiers. And we have a lot of content that's being generated that we're trying to publish or store in our institutional or national repositories that are not properly
Owen, seem to have lost. So just give him a bit of a few minutes for him to come back. Yes, he seemed to be struggling with his network this afternoon. Yes, we all know how network, internet could just misbehave at any given time. So apologies for that. We'll get him back on the meeting shortly. So just to remind us again, as you can also always use the chats. So if you have your comments and observation, as the presenter is on the present is making their presentation, you can use the chat to drop your comments and observation. Any question, pertinent question you have for the panelists, you can also use the Q&A button, type out your questions directly. Also at the end of the session, during the Q&A interactive session, you can use the raise your hand icon to uh, to ask you questions. You'll be given the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask any of the panelists a questions. Okay. So because still having some technical issue getting in back in here. Please give us a bit of minutes.
Right, my apologies for that. My internet connection actually went down. So sincere apologies for that. Let me see if I can get back. Ola, at what point did I drop out?
Good strategy.
Was I on this slide or?
No, the previous slide, sir.
All right, my apologies for dropping out. So I'm not quite sure at what point I dropped out. My apologies. But again, you know, connectivity is part of the infrastructure challenges we face in Nigeria. But anyway, I think just before I dropped off, I was talking about the need for a paid strategy. And as I was saying, the awareness levels tend to be a bit lower in Nigeria as opposed to maybe some other parts of the continent, particularly South Africa. South Africa a bit ahead of us in terms of the awareness and utilization of PIDs and infrastructure. But generally across Africa, it is generally a challenge. And so the LipSense infrastructure working group just felt that, okay, maybe we should try to come up with a strategy document that speaks to some of the challenges and how we can overcome them, and also help us to even inform some of the providers of infrastructure that we would want to leverage, that they would also need to understand some of the unique circumstances under which Africa operates in order to be able to provide better services for African researchers. So as I said, while I say that generally the adoption and awareness is low in the country, and the adoption and implementation of policies that insist on PID usage tends to be low. That's of course not to say, I don't want to tarnish everybody with the same brush. There are certainly some institutions, individual researchers who are doing great work and also trying to adopt PIDs in their work. And particularly, as I'd mentioned, in South Africa and Kenya, they have actually moved forward in terms of building consortiums with ORCID, using DOIs effectively in their research and publication practice. And we have other organizations like the Africa Archive that really supports getting all research institutions into the research organization registry. So there is good work going on around the continent, but more needs to be done across many of the countries, and a lot more cohesion is required as well. So to that end, as I mentioned, that's the LibSense program. I've prepared a document to sort of guide policy, and that document, it's been a long time, there's been so much that happened last year. We've been working on this document for quite a while, and we've only gotten it to a stage that it can be reviewed properly at the tail end of the year. Obviously as well, in Nigeria, because of the almost year-long strike that took place in, I think it was from February to October, most of our education practitioners are only just really getting back to work. So this document is being reviewed by some of the other LibSense members, and after that, we expect it to be published in February. Right. Now, part of that document does try to define some of the persistent identifier infrastructure requirements that every institution needs to have. Every researcher, lecturer, academic needs to be able to use in order to do their publications, citations, etc. And some of the areas that we want to explore in our strategy is the use of researcher IDs. And obviously, we'll talk about that during the interactive parts. So we're looking at the likes of ORCID, Google Scholar, Scopus ID as some of the potential researcher ID infrastructure that we want to use. And so it may be that depending on the needs, on the requirements, and the circumstances on a national basis, one researcher ID might be more prominent, probably more useful than the other. But the whole idea of the document is that researchers need to have IDs that they will use consistently across their careers in order to publish their content, and also to be able to be identified as the authors of that research and that publication. Digital object identifiers, or DOIs, are definitely identifiers that we need to have for all the work that we publish. And I know that that's a very big issue, that a lot of the outputs of journals and research work that's being published, whether they be in institutional repositories or some other publishing platforms, do not have DOIs. And as a result of that, the visibility of the work is almost non-existent. So, of course, we need to be able to look at how we're going to institutionalize the generation and use of DOIs in our higher education institutions, and what relationships do we form with those vendors of these identifiers to be able to make that an effective way to work. The other thing, I think in the morning session, we talked a lot about education identity. And we discussed, it can be overwhelming when you think of so many identities that need to be considered. But one infrastructure that certainly seems to be growing at a reasonable rate across the continent are identity federations. So if we have these national identity federations, and within those identity federations, we can start to store information about our researchers, and within those federations have additional attributes that store other identifiers about researchers, like an ORCID ID or a Scopus ID, then automatically you start to get the uptake and adoption of identifiers. So we have the infrastructure. If we can get the policies and the process ingrained as well, then it just becomes that as a lecturer is starts working in an organization, in a university, they're automatically mandated to have these identifiers, and the systems sort of mandate or drive the uptake of these identifiers. So we've gone into a bit of detail about how that can be implemented as part of the strategy, and also about how repositories, institutional repositories, national repositories should leverage handle systems. We discussed yesterday about our institutional repositories in Nigeria, and we know that a lot of the IRs in Nigeria use DSpace, but 99% of the institutional repositories that are being used in Nigeria do not use the handle system. So if they don't use the handle system, they're not visible by anybody, they're not interoperable with other systems. And then there's this misinformed thinking by the global community that the research and scholarly output from sub-Saharan Africa is less than 2% of the global contribution to research and scholarly work. I think that kind of global figure of between 2 to 3% is actually wrong. I think it's much higher, but because the work isn't visible, the global community has assumed that the research outputs in Africa and Nigeria is very low. Right. So the African, the African-driven strategy is really about trying to make sure we can showcase our scholarship locally. And if we can do that locally, then we can improve on FAIR, or findability and discovery, and longevity of the work that's being published. Yesterday as well, I think in the afternoon session, a lot of one of the lecturers, researchers, was basically talking about how long it took to publish her work in a high impact journal. It could take up to 10 months for the peer review to be done, and then for the work to be published, if it does get published. And then in order to even access the work, you have to get beyond the paywall. And so she was saying that if there was she was saying she would much rather publish on local infrastructure. But when you publish on local infrastructure, there's no visibility. And so again, that visibility all again comes down to the fact that maybe some of these local platforms are not adopting the necessary identifiers to make and adhering to globally available standards that makes that work visible or fair, findable, accessible, and interoperable and reusable. So again, that is part of that, is even for the infrastructure providers, the awareness of these pits is a challenge. And so we're looking at even our funders. We know that TED Fund are in the process of building an ETD repository for electronic theses and dissertations. And fortunately, one of the consultants for TED Fund was a speaker yesterday. And yesterday evening, we spoke about the need for a meeting so we can actually engage TED Fund in the strategies that they're adopting for the ETD. There doesn't seem to be a PID strategy evidence. And the consultant was quite interested in having some meetings so we can make a representation to TED Fund and NUC about this. So the strategy, even the awareness at all levels, from government down to the researcher on campus, does need to be improved. So there needs to be a lot of work in advocacy from, at all the levels to make this paid strategy work. The other thing is about governance and finance, that does need to be addressed. And we know that establishing PID consortia can help with governance and explore collaboration opportunities and financing models. So we do understand that consortia are very important, and where possible, where we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to be able to leverage what already exists in terms of consortia platforms, and see if we can leverage that to improve governance, and also look at the financing models, because for people who are aware of persistent identifiers and want to use them, the other challenge that they then face is that if their institution is not supporting them and they want to publish content and they're asking for identifiers, I know that even this year, I've had at least 10 requests from individual researchers asking if Eko-Konnect can help them in getting DOIs for their publications. So, and then the challenge with that is the cost of DOIs, which on a maybe global scale are relatively cheap. When you start to put them into the African or Nigerian context, it starts to be very expensive. So when you think that $1 is about nearly 800 naira right now, when an individual or an institution thinks about the cost of a single digital object identifier, article processing charges, it just becomes very overwhelming in terms of finances. So again, the PID strategy wants to try to look at the financing issues, and hopefully with the international partners and international organizations that are behind some of these infrastructure, they can probably look at how we can have more flexible financing models for Africa. And of course, part of the strategy has to be lots of advocacy and capacity building. So for Eko-Konnect, this conference really just sets the stage for a lot of work that we want to do to push advocacy physically on campuses. We're going to be setting up quite a lot of workshops and seminars in physical campuses across the country this year, just to create the awareness, push advocacy, and talk to institutional management about them considering and implementing policies that will help promote PIDs. And at the end of the day, we're hoping we can, with LipSense, establish an African community of practice where, all the African stakeholders and quite possibly some of the vendor organizations can have a forum where dialogue continues to happen, to ensure that stakeholders in Africa are not left out of global strategies, global systems that are supporting PIDs. So part of the recommendations, I think, within the templates is the need for consortia. We need to have consortia, PID consortia, that bring institutions, researchers together so that they're able to access infrastructure in a well-defined manner that ensures privacy, security, and all the other things that are necessary in today's digital age. of also to increase the adoption and use of PIDs. We have, hundreds of thousands of researchers in Nigeria. They all need to be brought into the global research and education ecosystem. And how do we implement this? Do we implement this at a national, regional, or institutional level? And how much autonomy does that take? So for a country of the size of Nigeria, do we try to look at a PID strategy that works on a national level? So where maybe an NREN like Eko-Konnect or NGREN can actually work with infrastructure providers to ensure that DOIs are available to all our institutions? Does it need to be done at an institutional level? These are some of the considerations. Obviously, there are different countries, so different strategies might be needed for different countries, depending on size and sophistication. But yes, these are all issues that and recommendations that we've put within the documents. And of course, understanding the complementarity of PIDs, how they all work together to make research visibility, research output, scholarly output, and impact very obvious, and even attracts funders to fund research work leveraging PIDs. So again, this is an overview. I think there'll be some more detailed presentations, but if you really need more information about what we've spoken about, you can contact LipSense, or you can contact Eko-Konnect. Either way, you'll get an adequate response to any inquiries. So I would like to, on that note, stop the share, and I hope that was a little bit useful for everyone. And just because I think I've taken up a fair bit of time, I'm going to go straight into introducing our next speaker. When I look at the agenda, that's Nabil Kassidi. So Nabil, if you start to get your presentation ready while I introduce you. Like I said, Nabil's quite very well known to us now in Nigeria, and Nabil is the engagement lead and MEA partnership liaison for EMEA ORCID. So I hope that's still your role, Nabil. You can correct us if that's not the case. Anyway, Nabil is responsible for fostering ORCID community adoption in the Middle East and Africa. And as part of his responsibilities, Nabil supports ORCID members as they develop new and existing integrations and workflows. He's previously worked at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, covering the Middle East, Mediterranean, and African region. And he believes in the ORCID mission and seeks to build collaboration across the region. Nabil is from Tunis, but he's now based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and he's passionate about engineering, art, and humanitarian work. He's multilingual and fluent in English, Arabic, and French. So over to you, Nabil.
All right. Thank you very much, Owen, for the introduction, and overall for presenting like an overview or the essence of what PIDs meant to. My name is Emil Ksibi. As Owen shared, I'm engagement lead at ORCID. Well, in terms of positions, we've been through a couple of restructures. So I went to consortia team. Now I'm with the direct team again, which is making me, closer to the Africa and let's say Arabic-speaking countries. I'm joined today with my colleague Lombe Tembo, who is the Grant Program Officer at ORCID. So I will be presenting a small introduction about ORCID, what is ORCID as an organization, what we are trying to do basically with with the research ecosystem, with the innovation ecosystem. How can we produce, let's say, a reliable digitalized content and machine readable output from the African continent, including the best state of the arts technology and infrastructure with the use of persistent identifiers like for places, for persons, and for objects. Without further ado, I'm gonna start with what is ORCID. So at ORCID, we are offering an identifier for researchers. So this 16-digit identifier is basically our product. We also offer a registry where you can find your ORCID ID included in a record. And in that record, we're gonna see this in the next slides. You can see how this record is split into different sections, including affiliation, works, funding, peer reviews, really all that is related to the researcher or the innovator or the contributor career, let's say, or biography or past activities and current one as well. We are using a standard standard procedures. We're using RESTful APIs, which are very much interoperable with different systems. We offer this API for the researchers to add themselves the information about their contributions. And we offer also a user interface like for developers and for systems as well, so that they can connect their systems and push automatically and synchronize information between the ORCID APIs and the ORCID registry. We are also a committed community building connectors. So we are not working by ourselves. Our members are also contributing in the evolution and the progress of our technical let's say support to members and to the community. There are some members that created some plugins with their integration. There are some members that helped some communities like the DSpace communities to build some connectors and plugins for other members, ORCID members in order for them to integrate with ORCID or to make the ORCID integration easier. And we are an international scale open research effort. So we really want to work with the global community, including open access and open science systems and open research systems. And we are also working with vendors to basically help them in getting their stakeholders as well connecting with ORCID. Sorry. The ORCID community. So now we are more than 1,300 members across 45 countries. We did more than 1,000 integration, including service providers, certifications, and direct integration with members. We have over 8 million records updated. So yeah, the registry is now containing maybe over 14 million records, but some of them are static, means that sometimes researchers just create the ORCID ID and just for the sake of the submission, just for the objective to submit, either for a grant or for to publish their work. But 8 million ORCID records do have an update in the record itself. Means that they are not static. They are used either by systems or by researchers themselves. So when we say systems, it's more of of the ideal situation where the information is flowing, between systems, and the researcher or the contributor will just have to provide their ORCID ID. We have consortia in different continents. Well, I just missed here Africa, but we have a consortium in South Africa. But otherwise, this is like a snapshot of like the countries where we have consortia. And you can also find more details and more statistics on our orcid.org/statistics web page. So when we talk about connections, this slide is really showing how this information is flowing between systems, and starting from a permission that we grant to these systems. I mean, as a researcher, I am in total control of my ORCID record. So there's no system that can interact with my ORCID record without my permission or authorization. So as soon as I give permission to a university, for example, to connect my affiliation, this university will push this information into my ORCID records, and then it will be visible and it will be displayed like persistently in my ORCID record. The source will be the university itself, and it is identified by an organizational identifier, either, well, for the case of a university, it should be either Ringgold or ROR. And then I can use this information, or any other system can use this information to read it and to know where I am affiliated, basically. Then if a funder would like to push any grant information or grant data regarding a grant that I applied for, they can do that as well, also with the permission that I'm giving to this funder. And they will be asserting this information as a funding with the source from the foundation itself. So if it is if this foundation is registered with ROR, then it's easy to retrieve this or synchronize this information. Otherwise, we are also using a couple of other organizational identifiers in the registry, so that this organization or this entity is identified properly in the registry, and that data can be retrievable or machine readable from any other source. And then if any other institution or organization would like to read this information, they can do it as well, and they will know that the source of this assertion is the funder itself. So in my case, I will not be able to modify this information. I can just delete it for some data regulation and privacy acts. So GDPR is one of them. And it is highlighting or like stressing on the fact that a user can delete any information related to them on the web. So this is why we kept the removal functionality available for researchers. As a publisher, I can also grant this permission from the researcher, and I can also push this information into their ORCID records. We're receiving a lot of like feedback from researchers that are saying that they received a notification from ORCID before even knowing that their work is published from from the journal or from the publisher. This means that the interoperability between the systems is way faster sometimes than the communication system at a publisher or at a journal. Yeah, so these are basically the information that will help a lot in reading background about researcher and using this information in case, basically to reduce administrative time for this researcher. So I will not have to ask them to fill in other forms. I will just get these information and yeah, use it in my system. Yeah, the visibility controls, it's also another important element. So if I want every section to be basically public or private to trusted parties or just private to me, I can do that. I mean, I can go to each and every employment or work or fund or research resources or any information asserted and control the visibility of that assertion, whether public or trusted parties or private. So that's on the visibility control. And next slide will be the circle diagram, where we have the employer collecting and connecting information with the ORCID record. The same thing that a funder can do. They can collect previous grants or current works or affiliation from the ORCID record, and they can also connect their grant information and grant data on the ORCID record of the researcher. The publisher can also do the same thing. They can collect the ORCID ID if they want it authenticated in their systems, and they can also push back. They can also push the assertion regarding the publication itself. So they can push metadata related to this publication, like title, I know, date and author and DOI and organizational identifier. They can all do it via their system. And once this information is on the ORCID records, all these institutions can share this information between their systems as well. So if the publisher is collecting this kind of information for themselves, then the employer can also see that in the publisher system. And the funder can also use this collection from the publisher to also make their analysis and make their, let's say, assessment. And the same thing between funder and employer, the information can flow easily and interoperably between their systems. This is an example of the ORCID record. So as I said, the trust markers would be really the assertion of the affiliation and the education and qualification. So you can see here that the first assertion is LoreHack, which is the researcher. And then the second assertion is the ORCID, or where this researcher is working, or like where this contributor is working. The same thing for education and qualifications. And if we'll have some time, we can go through live ORCID record and we can see more details about how this assertion is done and what kind of details can we see with these assertions. Now, in terms of implementation, we are working with all identifiers, so we are not like competing with any other identifier. We are including them in the registry, and you can connect them at any time. Of course, there are some procedures and functionalities that are in place. For example, Scopus is offering a search and link wizard that you can use to retrieve your publications from Scopus to ORCID. There is the Crossref search engine that also you can use to synchronize your the information that you have at Crossref with your ORCID record. So this is just showing that ORCID is open to work with all these identifiers. And if you have a local identifier that you want to also include in the registry, then you are very much welcome to do so. We can just write to ORCID, say we are using this identifier locally at the university, and we want it to be also included in the registry so that we can link or synchronize the information that this identifier is identifying basically with the ORCID identifier. So yeah, so just showing that ORCID is open to work with the different other identifiers, whether for works, for organization, or even for persons. I mean, if it's created locally. This is an example of an installation that we have at the Czech Technical University, where they used ORCID as main identifier for everything. So their whole identity management system is based on ORCID. Then they are coupling this with the university ID just to communicate with their CRIS system, DSpace, with their SIS system, and with the library system. So this is showing how I mean, everything can be connected and pushed back to ORCID, because the ORCID ID is included in, for example, the metadata that is pushed from the central identity management system to the other systems, or vice versa. Yeah. So the next slide is basically an invitation to look how to adopt ORCID. Basically, the very basic steps on how to do this. Identifying the local or national policies is very relevant as well in this context. And also working with communities like the LibSense community and the Eko-Konnect community in the Western Africa. We work similarly with East Africa partners or supporting organizations. We have I think now 5 members in Kenya, including Strathmore University, that are also looking into enhancing their ORCID integration and really looking into different solutions to include ORCID in their workflow. In Kenya, we also have NACOSTI, who is the National Commission for Science and Technology and Innovation, that are adopting ORCID in their portal. So if you go now to the NACOST portal, you will find only one sign-in option, which is to use your ORCID record. So they made it mandatory for all the permit applicants, because in Kenya, they offer this permit to do research for individuals and for organizations and for any entity or anyone that would like to perform research in Kenya. So they integrated ORCID in their sign-in page. So this kind of communities and systems that are piloting integrations and programs to basically promote the use of ORCID within their users and within their authors and researchers. So this is basically, so the second step is to identify stakeholders and target systems at organizations and universities. Of course, we work with like very basic directory of databases, and we work also with advanced systems and like maybe custom systems, and we will see this in the next slides, how we also connect with custom systems. Identifying system of record for affiliation information. So this is showing that also profiling systems can be integrated with ORCID or CV systems. Some institutions and universities do have a central CV system for researchers and students to retrieve their like CV, a complete CV of their work. We also do have these kind of integrations, and it is also useful to synchronize the information between the registry and these systems. The same thing for systems that will use ORCID in general, the ORCID information, whether it is in publishing, in funding, in peer review, even in asserting research resources, or works from all type of works like thesis and dissertations, posters, conferences. All these systems can be integrated with ORCID, and you can see this information flowing between both systems very easily. And then registering for API credentials, plan and test the integration. We offer a sandbox, member sandbox access for any potential member that would like to test the ORCID integration if they have a system in place and they don't want to engage directly with membership. They would like to test first their integration and see how this information is flowing. They can use the sandbox credentials. And yeah, so the last point is the most important point in my opinion. This is the engagement with researchers, because as much you have researchers engaged and having the knowledge on how ORCID function and how to fill in their ORCID record, as much as we have, I mean, our mission will be easier, and as much it is offering the dissemination of their outputs and like discoverability of their works and research. The next one is showing the different systems, maybe like the popular systems that are integrating with ORCID. In publishing, we work with Editorial Manager, OJS, PKP, Scholar One, eJournal Press, and Review. So these are mixed open access and commercial systems, and we work with all of them. In terms of data repository, we have Zenodo, GSpace, ePrints, Hydra, or Fedora. In RIMS system or research information systems, we work with InfoEd, Converse, DSpace, Elements, Irma, Pure, Vivo, and many more in development. So you can just Google ORCID service providers, and then you can find the complete list of certified service providers that are already having a plugin ready for members to directly launch their integration. They will not need any review from the ORCID team or any complex coding or configuration to have. So these service providers, once they are certified, it is very easy to connect with them and to connect your basically system instance with the ORCID APIs. So yeah, as I mentioned, we are open to work with custom connections. We have an excellent technical team and a member support technical specialist team that can help you and assist you in understanding the steps on how to integrate your custom system. If you have this system in a just a website or an isolated database, or in siloed, you can always contact us as soon as you feel ready to integrate with ORCID and ready to kick off your technical integration work. And there are some code examples that you can find in our documentation. And if there is any feedback or question or setback around this, please don't hesitate to contact us via our support team, and we will be very happy to assist you. Now, this is the workflow generalized, or the big picture of this workflow. So whether you are an employer, a university or publisher or a funder, you will be able to connect with the ORCID record of a researcher as soon as this ORCID ID is authenticated. So this is the first phase, the authentication of the ORCID ID. And then your system will be able to collect this ID and include it in the metadata. So if you are pushing if you are collecting metadata for publication, or you want some kind of metadata even for the employment information, you can assert this ID with the metadata, and with this, this ORCID ID will be, living with that metadata for, persistently, let's say. And then if this is part of an information that needs to be connected to a record, means that pushing back the publication information, you can still use this metadata and push it back to the ORCID record of the individual, so that we reach the final phase, which is a full synchronization between your system and the ORCID record of the researcher, so that next time the researcher will just have to enter their ORCID record, and that will be recognized, authenticated by the system. They will also assign it to a work or an affiliation, embedded in this kind of information, and then pushed back to the ORCID record. So if there is any question about this, full picture and this workflow, please let me know, and we can dive into more details. But I prepared the next slide, which is trying to simplify these kind of steps. If you want to visualize what is authentication, basically it is the integration of this button to allow the researcher or the user to connect their ORCID record. So what will happen as soon as I click on this button? A call will be sent to the ORCID API, which is called the redirect URI. And as soon as your ORCID record is confirmed in the registry, you will receive a message, this authorization message. Nothing will go further if you don't authorize. So as soon as you authorize, I mean, the researcher will authorize this connection, the information will be flowing automatically between the API and that system. And in this case, for example, State University would like to add or update biographical information into the ORCID record or into your ORCID record, add or update research activities, and read limited access information, because the some information is limited to just the trusted parties, like I explained, the three different levels of visibility of each and every activity and each and every section of the ORCID record. Then we recommend to display this ID in systems or platforms or databases. You can add this green icon and the ORCID ID of the author, and in that case, it will be very easy to access the ORCID records in the publication or in the work itself. The next phase is the collection of the information. So as I explained, as soon as the ORCID ID is embedded in the metadata that is flowing between your system and the ORCID record, then you can easily call this information at later stage or make it accessible for any other system to read it. And that's the essence of collecting an authenticated ORCID record from this workflow. Now the connection of the record is basically pushing this information back to the ORCID record, and you can see here an employment that is pushed by ORCID, basically for unemployment. Like just an example, that this user, for example, is lecturer from this date to present. You can see also the organizational identifier in gold. You can see also the date created and the source. So this is the connection of the information from the ORCID registry to, from your system to the ORCID registry. The last bit is the synchronization, is where really the researcher will just have to enter the ORCID record and see this information read by the system from your record, and then whatever the process or whatever the workflow that is processing this information is configured, either it is for funding, for publishing, or for affiliation, you will see this information flowing back directly to your ORCID record without your intervention. That's basically indirectly replying to the FAIR principles, which is making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So as soon as this information is pushed back to the ORCID record, you will receive a notification, and you will not have, the researcher will not have any further action to do. So just a small mention here on the very basic objective of ORCID, which is disambiguating names. And this is a snapshot from my ORCID record, and you can see that I added my name in different variations, in different languages, and you can do that. This is very much encouraged to be done. And that will also make your ORCID record complete and including all the relevant information about yourself. Some resources that you can also consult after the presentation. So if you want to join our API users Google group, you can do it at any time. It is free. You shouldn't be a member to do that. And if you have any question about the ORCID integration or the ORCID as an organization or the workflows, you can post that or search and retrieve previous answers. There's a lot of nice discussions there, and it's a nice source of learning more about ORCID and how the integration is done. We have some outreach resources as well that you can use at any time. So just tell us what you want, and we can provide you some guidance on how to make, I don't know, posters or banners or any kind of outreach materials that you want to use to engage more with your researchers. So in terms of impact and assessment, so the question now is, how do I gain visibility with my ORCID record? Again, the connection with other identifiers is also another asset here. So if I'm connecting my ORCID record with my Scopus ID, with the ISNI, for some works, and adding the Academia Edu ID, for example, or any kind of other IDs, I will contribute to making this visible, because whatever the other system will be, retrieving this identifier, they will, retrieving the ORCID ID, they will see this connection with the other platforms, and they can easily connect to them. Yeah, sure. Now, yeah, so just 3 minutes or maybe less.
Three minutes.
All right, so I'm gonna quickly explain this. So this is how ORCID is helping into making the university ranking or like promoting the university ranking. So we are very neutral with all metrics and ranking factors or KPI. But what we know is that the better data quality in a workflow can lead to better ranking. So if I'm adding the ORCID ID in my publications, if I'm having all the affiliations in my ORCID record, and if this ORCID record is linked to Scopus and PubMed and Web of Science, then automatically this is representing a quality output that is contributing as well to the success and the promotion of the ranking of my institution. So this is how basically ORCID is supporting the university or institutional ranking, but not directly, right? Just by providing a better quality of data. This is how basically it's triggering the permission. So you can also consult this slide after the presentation. It's basically the same workflow that I explained, whether if we permit the system to access our record, then they can do that. Without this permission, they will not be able to access or connect with the ORCID record. The institutional benefits and researchers' benefits, of course, for institutions, it's saving a lot of time and efforts in when automating this information, managing the organizational name, and maintaining links to your researchers past, present, and future. For researchers, it's improving discoverability. It is improving also the time spent in administrative tasks. And it also controls and manages the trusted and easily shareable record of their research activities and outputs. Now I'm gonna leave the floor. I hope that I didn't take a lot of time. I'm very sorry, Owen, for that. But I'm gonna leave the floor to Lombe to basically present the Global Participation Fund program, which is I'm gonna leave everything to Lombe. So yeah, and if there's any question, please feel free to put it on the chat. Otherwise, connect with Owen and he can convey the message to us. Lombe, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Nabil. I've got loads of questions, but I can always get to you about a few things. We'll see if we have enough time for questions and answers. Lombe, I hope your presentation won't be too long because we still have one speaker waiting and we're a little bit pressed for time. So I hope it's we can try to keep it. We'll give you about 10 minutes if you don't mind, just because of time.
Thank you, Owen. And thanks, Nabil, for the introduction. I think I'll try to keep it as short as possible. So maybe we could go to the next slide. Yes, so I think a lot of what the Global Participation Program is links quite a lot to what Owen said earlier about how ORCID adoption, well, PID adoption generally is currently higher in countries with high income levels. And so studies were done, and this is the data that came up. And as you can see from that graph, the data points really show that the African researchers, or mainly researchers in the Global South, really face, they have a disadvantage when it comes to getting their work out there in terms of visibility as well as recognition for their work. Next slide, please. Yeah, so one of our goals in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to increase the adoption of ORCID in underrepresented regions. And when we talk about underrepresented regions, we're really talking about low-income countries as well as lower middle-income countries as categorized by the World Bank. And so the desired outcomes that we are hoping for is, for starters, to help researchers who are based in the Global South to increase their visibility and also to claim credit for their work, as Nabil explained earlier, and how those processes work. Secondly, we would like to improve funder, publisher, and policymaker understanding of the contribution and impact of researchers in those specific countries. And also, we would like to improve the ability of academic institutions to better understand their global collaborations, as well as to benchmark their performance against others. So in terms of our approach, we're doing this by, for starters, fostering the development of communities of practice for low and lower middle income countries. So our focus communities, basically. And this is by adapting ORCID's existing national and regional consortium model. And secondly, we want to work with local partners who can then build the understanding and use of ORCID in local context. And I think this conference is a very big example of how we're working with Eko-Konnect, and a very big aspect of this has been really about PIDs in Africa and really building on that strategy. And we would also like to target specific technical integrations that drive adoption or use of ORCID in underrepresented communities. Next slide, please. So the Global Participation Program is a two-pronged approach, and the two different parts of this are, for starters, the Membership Equity Program, and secondly, the Global Participation Fund. So I'll explain a bit about the Membership Equity Program first. So this is really a discounted membership fee structure for consortium members. And basically because we're trying to encourage the adoption of members in lower income countries and lower middle income countries. We have a threshold of 3 members for the initial year for a consortium, as opposed to what is in other places, it's 5 as a minimum number of members. And also we have a discounted membership fee structure, which is 80% for low income countries and 50% for lower middle income countries. So this is specifically for the consortiums, because like Nabil had mentioned earlier, for individuals to have an ORCID record that's completely free. And then also the membership equity program is fully funded by ORCID. And so for the second part of the Global Participation Program, we have the Global Participation Fund. And this fund, the GPF, has 2 specific programs. The first one being community development and outreach. And the second one is grants that are for technical integration. So the community development funds are really to fund local partners who can then go ahead to build ORCID communities of practice in the Global South. So it could be in their countries, or it could be, taking a regional approach. This could be done in different ways. And then the second one is funds for technical integration. And these ones are basically to fund the development of systems that are likely to drive participation in the Global South. So just to quickly mention here that our first cycle happened last year, and we're very happy to be working with Eko-Konnect as one of our award winners for last year's grant. But we do have a second cycle opening around March or April, and it's going to be made available on the website that I will share in the chat. So the GPF is made possible by the generosity of ORCID's founding lenders, but the admin costs are then covered by ORCID. Next slide, please. So now I'm just going to quickly talk about the fund objectives and the structure of the GPF. Next slide, please. So the focus and the goals of the fund align with ORCID's strategic objective to increase global participation. And that's a very big aspect of what the GPP and what the GPF is trying to do. So like I mentioned earlier, when we talk about the focus communities, we're really trying to engage more organizations that are based in low and lower middle income countries. And also something to note is that the organizations that apply for this funding don't only have to be based in these countries. They could be based outside of the Global South, but as long as the impact of what they're doing is being felt in the Global South, and that can be proven through the application. So in terms of the goals, we're trying to remedy ORCID participation gaps, like I mentioned earlier. And I think this is what I was saying earlier about just trying to focus on those the specific focus communities, and also to build the understanding and use of ORCID in local contexts. And I think I'd like to refer once again to what Owen was saying earlier about how for Nigeria, for instance, it's the largest country, and there's so much potential to engage researchers to make sure that they're using PIDs and that their research is visible. And this is one way that can feed into what ORCID is trying to do. And lastly, we're trying to create and enhance technical integrations to support these burgeoning communities. So apart from them growing, we also want them to be able to have that fallback of technical integrations that can support them. And so we believe that providing funding for that sort of thing is going to help the whole process. Next slide, please. This is just an expansion of the 2 different grant programs. And like I said, the first part, which is the community development grants, this is really for building communities and helping them to support, helping the awardees to support the communities and really build those ORCID communities of practice in the Global South. In terms of the technical integration grants, actually this time around, we only had one winner under this. We had 4 award winners for the community development grants. So we're hoping, especially for Africa, we're hoping to have more technical integration grants coming from Africa. And here what we're trying to do really is to build integrations, to build utilities, and also to increase the support use in terms of creating documentation, outreach, and also support for resources that are created through the grant program. Next slide, please. Yes, so in terms of the structure of this program, we are planning to have 2 cycles per year. Last year, we started a bit late in the year, so we only had 1 grant cycle, with the winners being announced a few days ago, with 5 winners coming out. And like it says there were 5 grants for the first cycle, and each grant is each funding award per grant is between $5,000 and $20,000 US. So the next, like I said, the next grant cycle is opening in March or April, and we're hoping to have another one around September, so towards the end of the year. But the grantee benefits, for starters, they would have dedicated ORCID staff contact. So depending on their specific needs, the ORCID staff would then come in to support them in that way. And then secondly, there's invitation to participate in the ORCID grantee forum and community. So we're really hoping that the community will grow outside of only the awardees, but also that the grant will have a long-term impact as opposed to a one-off event or anything in that regard. And then also invitations to grantee community events, and also ORCID virtual and in-person events moving forward. And lastly, one of the other benefits is inclusion in ORCID's ongoing communications program. Yeah, so this is the structure of the program and some of the benefits that grantees would be getting out of the program apart from the monetary aspect of it. Next slide, please.
2 minutes.
Yes, I'm actually done. Thank you so much. So any questions, I'm sure we'll be
We'll take them. Yeah, we'll take them. I've actually got a few questions, so we'll take them after the next presentation. But thank you very much, Lambe. And it's nice to have actually kind of now seen, I know what you look like and what you sound like. So I'm looking forward to engaging with you and the Eko-Konnect team. So I'm looking forward to engaging with you moving forward. So thank you very much, Nabil and Lambe. So we're really pressed for time. So I'll quickly like to introduce our final speaker for today, and that is Mr. Idowu Adegbilero Iwari. He's a Science Scholarly Communications Librarian at the Afe Babalola University. He's the head of the e-library and the first Nigerian to serve as a Skullcom librarian in a Nigerian library. Idowu is a winner of many prestigious grants and scholarships, including the prestigious J. Jordan OCLC Early Career Fellowship Award for the year 2016. A longtime enthusiast of open access, Idowu consolidated his entry into the Skullcom sector when he received the Force 11 Scholarly Communication Institute FSCI 2018 scholarship to attend the summer course in scholarly communications at the University of California in San Diego. He has recently been offered a specialized board grant to attend the Library Publishing Coalition Forum, that was in 2020, at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in Worcester, Massachusetts. So, Idowu, the floor is yours. You've got about 20 minutes.
All right, thank you so very much, Owen, for the introduction. I believe everybody can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this conference for the second time, since 2020. So, and I've enjoyed the events that I've witnessed. So I'll be going straight to my presentation, which is also belonging to the family of theme, for today, for this afternoon session, which is on PID, the persistent identifier. So I'll be speaking on DOIs for research publication. So I'm speaking live from Afe Babalola University in Ado-Ekiti, Nigeria. Owen, is my slide on, or should I share my screen?
Yes, you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Yeah. So quickly, what is just some quick facts about DOI. As of today, more than 190 million DOIs have been assigned, throughout the world through the work of registration agencies, which I'll be speaking about much more later in the presentation. And registration agencies, they are members of the International DOI Foundation, the IDF. So the IDF is a global governance body overseeing the DOI system. Okay, and I'll be talking a bit more about the IDF later in the presentation. Registration agencies, which I will call RA henceforth, offers systems to customers who wish to assign DOIs. Okay, and the DOI system standard was created by the IDF and adopted as an international standard under the ISO as ISO 26324 in 2012. That's just a bit of some facts about DOI. But what is DOI? DOI is an acronym that represents what we call digital object identifier. And like I said earlier, it's one of the most popular, PID. Okay, and it means digital identifier of objects, and it does not mean identifier of digital objects. What that means is that it extends beyond, digital objects. So it is about objects. If you are talking of objects, what are we talking about? We're talking of any entity, okay, such as things like physical, digital, or abstract, entities, and resources, parties, and licenses. Okay, the initial focus of DOI was actually for the scholarly communication community, and which is around documents such as articles and data sets. Okay, but the DOI project, is, like I said, is extensible. It is far beyond, that now, and it is even being considered as the future of the digital network. Okay, because the goal is to look at how every, entity, every object out there, parties, resources, licenses, and what have you that are physically available, and also available digitally online, would have a DOI, okay, for the sake of the benefits, of the DOI, which I will also highlight later in the presentation. So digital identifier means network actionable identifier. It is not just a dummy identifier, or something you could work on, something you could click on and do something with it. For instance, for journals, journal articles that have DOIs, like one journal in Abuad, in Afe Babalola University, if you click on the DOI from the journal website, it takes you to somewhere in the digital space, to Google Scholar. So that's one of the things that digital identifier offers. A DOI is the most widely known and used PIDs. Okay, because it extends beyond different kinds of objects. Okay, like I said earlier, unlike OCID, which has to do with humans, and some other form of IDs, that have specific areas that they deal in. So the DOI used to be unqualified as DOI, but as the project expands, so there was a need to qualify it such that we could have a DOI system and DOI name. So I'll be talking about DOI name and later about DOI system. So what is DOI name? A DOI name is an identifier, not location, in particular, even though it could end up being a location, but the goal is for it to be an identifier, okay, of an entity on digital networks. It provides, the DOI name provides a system for persistent and actionable identification and interoperable exchange of managed information on digital networks such as the internet. A DOI name can be assigned to any entity, physical, digital, or abstract, primarily for sharing with an interested user community or managing as intellectual property. Okay, DOI names may also be expressed as URLs, okay, or what is uniform resource locators or uniform resource identifiers. Okay, an example, I use one of the DOIs. The DOI name from our journal project in Africa University. You could see it there. Okay, like I said, it is not a location, but an identifier. And the first thing there, the first line there, you see the name, and it will also come as a URL, just like you are seeing through a proxy server. All right. And now the DOI system. My presentation will be a bit technical, and of course, we'll come also into the general, area, but the following slides, we're talking about the technical aspect of the DOI. The DOI system provides a technical and social infrastructure for the registration and the use of persistent interoperable, use of persistent interoperable identifiers, called DOIs. For use on digital networks. The DOI system has some components, okay, which are sort of ready to use package system, okay. And one of it is a specified standard numbering syntax, consisting of what we call the prefix, the suffix, and a forward slash. Just like in the example you're seeing on the screen. Okay, you have the prefix for DOI. Yesterday, during the presentation of the Nigerian repository project, okay, we talked about the handle system and the prefix, for that particular, repository, okay, 20 something. But for DOI globally, okay, there is a prefix, for the naming syntax, and there's a suffix. The prefix starts with 10 dots, okay? And that is, if you see 10 dots, anything, okay, you should know that it's pointing to a DOI. So there are, two major components of it, the prefix and the suffix. So the prefix is assigned by the registration agency, the highway, and the suffix is at the disposal of the publisher or of the user of the DOI system. Or the system can also, digital system, automated system can also assign a suffix, on behalf of publishers or users of DOI system. Now, the other component of the DOI system is the resolution service. Okay, like we said earlier, that the DOI is not a location, but an identifier. So, what it has to resolve within the digital space to a particular location, and there is need for a resolution service, which is a component of the DOI system. Now, we also have another component being a data model incorporating, sort of data dictionary, okay? And lastly, we have an implementation mechanism through the social infrastructure of organizations, policies and procedures for the governance and registration of DOI names, okay? Now, The next slide talks about the unique functionalities of the DOI system. Okay, one of it is persistence. Okay, and persistence. That is, if the material is moved from its current location, perhaps a website, once it has a DOI, you can be sure that almost all of time, you can have access to that material. So even if it is rearranged or bookmarked elsewhere, with DOI, the material could persistently, exist. The interoperability that people have been talking about since yesterday. So DOI has that sort of functionality, with other data from other sources. Then the DOI system is extensible. Okay, you can have new features and services through the management of groups of DOI names. Then it also provides a single management of data for multiple output formats, and this is platform independent. Okay, it does not depend on the platform you're using. Okay, then there is class management of applications and services, and then lastly, the dynamic updating of metadata, applications and the services accompany the DOI. Now, how does the DOI system handle its resolution tasks? Okay, then that brings us to the handle system technology, which I spoke about earlier, and I guess which somebody spoke about yesterday on the Nigerian project. The handle system, we have the local handle system and the global handle system. But the handle system, is responsible for the resolution task of the DOI system. And this handle system is a component of the DOA, that is the digital object architecture, which is designed to enable information to be managed in the network over periods of time. And why is the handle system technology important for DOI system? One, it offers the capability for multiple resolution. I told you about resolution of DOI names or system to a particular site or a place in the digital space. So there could be single resolution, that could be multiple resolutions. So the handle system offers, the multiple resolution, task. Then there is, it is scalable. The handle system is scalable. It is reliable. Okay, and the speed of resolution is quite, good, for this kind of system. And it has been proven, in several digital library projects. Okay, there's a proven usage of it. Like I keep referencing the repository system, for instance. Okay, there is no way you're going to have a successful repository project without, having a good handle system, being deployed along that particular project. So, it has been proven to be quite good in digital, library projects. Then also, already implemented and supported in several practical, systems, also beyond the library or digital, library projects. And there is a commitment by the developers to open standards. We talk about open access, we talk about interoperability, the handle system allows for all of this, okay? And there is a commitment to further development of the system, okay? Now, the handle system, like I said, it's a component of the digital object cloud that is built on the digital object architecture. As you can see, the user's end, the left-hand side, users an automated process trying to, handle persistently identified, self-explaining digital objects, in the digital on digital networks, and you can see the handle system right there in the second to the last, column, okay, which are securely and redundantly managed and stored in the internet. And lastly, they also, interact with existing or future information storage systems, as overlays. Now, the implementation and governance of DOI system. Okay, how is DOI implemented, and how is it governed? The DOI system is implemented through a federation of registration agencies. Okay, and we have quite a number of them. My arrow is pointing to some of the examples of registration agencies. We have the RET, the Crossref, the CN, KI, on the data side, EIDR, MEDRA, Publications Office, PSI Identify, and all of that. Some, majority of them are in English, and we also have some that are for the Chinese world. Okay, so but the most popular ones around us here, the Crossref, data site, which I believe people have talked about. I mean, by way of mentioning during this conference. Now, the RAs use policies and tools developed through a parent body, and that is the International DOI Foundation. Okay, that's the parent body of that oversees the affairs of the RAs. The IDF, I'll talk about the IDF shortly. The IDF is the governance body of the entire DOI system. Now, the International DOI Foundation, the IDF, what they do, they provide common infrastructure, for the entire system. Okay, there's technical resolution, data model, and all of those things are some of the things provided by the International DOI Foundation. And they also techno-social, they also provide social, support for the system, such as obligation for persistence, backup, and all of that in case in the event of failure. Then they also deal with common issues such as standardizations, liaisons, the outreach to new communities, and essentially the IDF is a not-for-profit membership-based federation, and they have elected board, working groups, and meetings, to administer and manage, the foundation. Okay, as presently, there is no full-time staff. We essentially, based on volunteerism or and the staff are often outsourced, based on who can volunteer. So that's just about the IDF and how they sort of govern the entire DOI system. Now,
3 minutes.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm almost done. Yeah, the DOI benefits to implementing organizations. Okay, who can implement DOI? Publishers can do so. Institutions can do so. And the various organizations that have something to do in the digital space. Now, the benefit is one, you know what you have. Okay, as users are able to look at catalogs of contents available throughout the enterprise, and you can also find what the organization wants. Okay, they also know where those things exist and be able to also get it. Now, we're talking of DOI for research publications. So, what are the benefits of DOI to researchers? One, in this era of citation, people are very curious about citation, the impact of their research work, as individuals and as institutions or even funders. So with DOI, researchers will be able to track their citation, and be able to get accurate metrics on how and where their research outputs are being used or referenced throughout the world. And it also increases data sharing and reuse by making information discoverable over the long term. And they are also required and strongly encouraged in certain citation style guidelines. DOI is becoming part of the requirement for certain citation style these days. And lastly, but not the least, DOIs are also becoming a required part of repository, journal, and database submission workflows. if you don't append DOI of cited materials in your manuscript, some donors will not actually take that manuscript seriously, and you will not be able to submit it. So DOI is becoming that important. Now, I want to quickly talk about the use case of DOI in my university. Okay, before we started deploying DOI in the university here, we sort of, have some antecedent developments that we took care of before we could, venture into the project. Now, one, we created the Office of Scholarly Communication in the library. Okay, and we deployed the SCOCOM librarian in person of my very self. And we also, try to look at, okay, because we want to be publishing scholarly content, so which platform can we use for that? Okay, so that is tailor-made for that. So we thought of openness, and in the spirit of openness, we went with PKPs and ODS. PKP is a public knowledge project, of the government of Canada. Now, we also thought of the migration of university-based journals to the new donor platform, because before the Scholarly Communication Unit was created, we observed that the university has some journals and they were using other content management system, okay, like WordPress and all of those web development tools. Okay, to do that, we advised them professionally that this is not the way to go. If you want a journal to be visible and to interoperate with other systems, within the scholarly communication, sector. Now, for DOI, the core activities we embarked on. One, we did research, okay, and we selected the registration agency. So I will not go into those details, but you can see on the screen that Crossref happened to be our RA, okay, for reasons that our research, justified. Okay. Now we also developed a DOI naming policy. Okay, so that what is coming from us, we have a policy of how to go about the DOI name. Okay, for all our contents, and we also assign and register DOI names, on continuous basis as we publish articles online. Then, of course, money matters. We pay our dues to the RP, because this RP, some of them requires membership, and some of the membership are categorized, and we do annual payments, for membership and for the DOI you are registering. Now, yeah, so like I said, Crossref was our preferred RP. So this is one of the use cases. This is a journal. On the right-hand side of the screen, the World International Journal of Natural Science and Applied Sciences. You will see the DOI assigned, circled there, following the policy we have stipulated, for our DOI naming. Now, two more things before I stop. Now, as a member of the Crossref RA, okay, we have obligations, and for anybody who might be considering, using Crossref as a RA, okay, some of the obligations you should have at the back of your mind are: one, you have to deposit metadata, of all published content, and you create the DOI links. Register only what you have the legal rights to do. Okay, maintain and update your metadata in landing pages for a long time. Okay, and then follow the Crossref DOI display guidelines, undertake reference linking, and of course, pay invoices. And this is another information to scholars out there, who might have difficulties, generating DOI for cited references. Perhaps you prepare your manuscript, you're submitting it to a journal, and the journal is asking you to supply the DOI for all the articles you have cited where they exist. So the way to go about it is to just copy your references, okay, and do a DOI lookup using Crossref's and DOI lookup service. That's the link to it. Paste it, then submit, and any article online that as a DOI, they will come out, as a result for you to copy and paste in your reference list. I've done this for quite a number of researchers, and they've come back, to be very, very grateful for the help. So thank you very much, everybody, for the attention this afternoon. And some of the references, or resources consulted. So I'm happy to receive your questions on any of these. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Idu. That was a very comprehensive presentation, quite excellent.
Thank you, Owen.
Thank you very much. It's 3 o'clock. So first of all, may I indulge panelists and attendees, if you don't mind spending about an extra quarter of an hour, because I personally, I could just a Q&A, just the questions I have alone for you, Idowu, and for Lombe and Nabil from ORCID, I could do at least another 1 hour. So I've got quite a few questions myself, but we'll try and do a Q&A for the next 15 minutes or so, close the session. Right. So I hope attendees are happy to stay on. I know some of you have already dropped off, but are there any questions? I don't see any questions in the Q&A chat. So does anyone have any questions or comments they want to make? If so, raise their hands. Panelists can also, even if panelists have questions, they're free to raise their hands as well. Any questions or comments?
Okay. Owen, please, just to for Nabil and Lombe, maybe Nabil especially. Our system, we use the OJS, which you also highlighted in your presentation, and we also integrated the OJS API into some of the journals, but maybe it was a mistake on my part or something. I wanted to do the API integration for multiple, journals. Well, the first one I did it for was a success, such that registrants can register, through with their OKIB and enter into a journal. Okay, but trying to use the same API ID for the other journals, it's not the nice experience for me. So maybe, I don't know if I can speak with you
before Nabil answers, first of all, do you mind if you stop sharing your screen?
I've been trying to do that. Okay. Just a minute. Yeah, okay, done.
Not done.
Done here, actually.
It's not done. We can still see. Stop sharing from your end.
Okay. Maybe I should.
So I think you click on the share screen button.
Yeah.
Just look up and
oh yeah, I've seen it. Sorry, yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Right. So that sounded like a tech support question, Idu, for Nabil. And if we have some time, I would let Nabil answer that. But I didn't really want to do tech support on this conference at the moment. Suffice to say that although a related question I did have for Nabil and Lombe, based on your question, Idu, was what are the kind of technical skills that you think are required to be able to enforce technical integrations for ORCID? So either Nabil or
yeah, I'm gonna go for this one, if you permit, Lombe. I think it's a really good question. So it really depends on the system that you want to integrate with ORCID. So if you have an OJS instance like Idoyu shared, then it's very easy, I think, and Idoyu really experimented this and tried this from his side. You just need to enter the client ID and client secret in a configuration box, right? And then tick on some options that you want, as a display when you are running the system. If it's a custom integration, so if you have a custom system that you built by yourself, like I don't know, database or repository, then you will need a developer. You will need kind of a like skills or coding skills in order to build a program that will communicate with the ORCID API. And in that code or in that program that at the end, will be an application, you will have, a field where you add the client ID and client secret in order to connect your system, with the ORCID API. For DSpace, it's also becoming very easy now because DSpace 7 and these kind of latest versions are offering also an easy connection with ORCID. It's very similar to OJS. You just need to enter your client ID and client secret, and then you can launch your DSpace instance. And just to get back to Idoyu question on the multiple journals, I mean, the answer, of course, tech support team and member support technical specialists can provide a way better answer than myself. But I mean, on top of my head, just keep in mind that each and every instance of OJS for, I mean, or each and every instance of OJS for the different journals will have its own source. If you want to assert back this publication to the ORCID record, means that if you have, for example, Journal of Philosophy and Journal of Science, and they are both under the umbrella of the same university, what we recommend is to use the university's credentials so that every publication that goes either to Journal of Science or Journal of Philosophy will be under the university's name. The source will be the university's name, because if you will be using, for example, the credentials from from the Journal of Philosophy and try to assert publications on science, the source will be Journal of Philosophy. Will still, still stay the Journal of Philosophy, right? While it is Journal of Science. We worked with PKP into offering multiple instances for a member basically to use different integrations, but this is more for consortium and premium members, because these members are having 5 API credentials or 5 API accesses that usually they are using them in different systems. For example, in university, they have a university press, they allocate 1 access. They have an HR system, they allocate another access. They have a repository system, they allocate 3rd access, and so on, for funding, for CV, for central CV, for everything. But in the case of multiple journals, you can use your primary, premium access or consortium access, because consortium members are automatically having a premium access, to basically integrate those at least 5, journals with every journal having its name as a source of the assertion of the publication. I hope that this is answering both questions.
Right. Well, I've got a twin set of questions to throw at you, Nabil, but they're hopefully easier to answer. You talked about some of the repositories that are supported, and you did mention Hydra Fedora, which is great, because I do know that the TED-Fund project, so TED-Fund is our major, in Nigeria, major education funder, and they're involved in building a national repository for electronic thesis and dissertation, and it's based on Fedora. So you talked about the certification process. I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on what that is. And then secondly, you made reference to a use case in, I think you said it was the National Institute in Kenya, where they only access the repository with using an ORCID ID. Now, what informed that policy to make it just using just the ORCID ID only to have access to the repository as your credential?
All right, yeah, another great question from Owen. So the service provider certification is very simple. So if you have a custom integration either built on Fedora or any other system, or I don't know, Invenio or any kind of or DSpace, because DSpace is also customizable. You can apply for the service provider certification at ORCID. I'm gonna quickly post the link here on the chat just to see the basic requirements to have this certification from ORCID. It is basically very similar to a standard, review of an integration. The fact that you are adding or pushing information into the registry from that system is mandatory. Providing documentation on how to use your system is also kind of relevant, to the certification. The brand guidelines on how to use the ORCID logo, the ORCID colors, and how to basically add this string of identifiers is also should be reviewed by the member support technical specialist team. And yeah, I mean, you can consult the requirements on that link. They are on the bottom of the page. And if there is any question regarding any of those, we can work on some kind of preliminary meetings before heading to the review with the technical support team, because the technical support team will help you and assist you to understand how to fulfill all the requirements, and then they will schedule a demo with you. I mean, a separate meeting just to do the reviewers work, right? To test this the system, ask you where you are. Yeah, a little bit deep technical question, but they will ask you if you are storing your access tokens, because for each and every call that your system is doing with the ORCID API, there is what we call access tokens. And they will ask you if the data is safe, stored somewhere, if you're collecting the ORCID ID somewhere. So these kind of questions that they actually have already helped you to solve them when they are assisting you. I mean, before the review phase. So that's I hope this is answering the question regarding the service provider. So for Nacosti, you can just head on their website. I'm just gonna copy here the link. Sorry, this chat box. And yeah, so they just implemented ORCID into a custom integration. I think they built that portal themselves. And if you go to the login page, or if you try to log into that page, you will find sorry, it's a little bit slow here, but you will find that you need to authenticate your ORCID ID before going to the portal. I'm just gonna say Nacosti RIMS. I think it's the correct link. I mean, does that answer your question regarding Nacosti, or do you want to?
Yeah, certainly. And I can, based on the links, we can follow up with that. So okay. That does.
This is the correct link. Sorry. So this is the research portal that Nacosti. Oh, so if you click on this link, you will find that there's no other way to submit, basically, or to access. Only, I mean, only if you authenticate your ORCID ID.
Okay, fine. I was just wondering what informed that policy, though, to use just the ORCID ID for Nakosti.
I think it's their work. I mean, I cannot see any kind of open access policy or PIDs policy in Kenya until now. I just, I know that they have data protection policy or like data protection act, but I mean, I'm not aware of any kind of national open access or PID strategy in Kenya.
And the reason why I asked the question, Nabil, was I don't know if you're in the morning session, but we were talking about identifiers and strategies to implement education identifiers. And sort of at the end of the session, we were talking about in Nigeria, sometimes we're very taciturn in terms of being forward with ideas and suggestions. But once an edict or policy is recommended, not even recommended, enforced, we're very quick to follow them. So, there's this whole carrot and stick approach. And in Nigeria, when it comes to enforcement of policy, it tends to be a strict stick approach. So I was just wondering that if you're going to enforce a policy where you have to use only your ORCID to access certain information or repositories, then that would probably drive up the adoption. Because what I see quite a lot with our researchers, and I think you alluded to it, Nabil, in your presentation, if there is a requirement, if a prerequisite to have an ORCID ID in order to get funding or something, then we know how to then go get the ORCID ID, which just becomes really dormant after it's been used for a particular objective. And what we really want to do is actually make our community understand, why they should be using these identifiers and not just use them just because of some enforced policy or, oh, if you don't get one, then you're not going to have access to something. We really want users to understand why they're using that, hence my question. But that leads me back to, before you say anything, Nabil, that leads me back to Idu. So in the Abwad use case, I'm really happy to see that you're using the DOIs. And you talked about your units sort of looking at how to enforce or how to use the DOIs. Where did the instructional policy come from? Did it come from management? Where did the policy come from? And then considering the financial implications, how did Apple management or yourselves address that? Because I hear when I'm speaking to institutions, there's always an outcry when it comes to paying for some of this ID PID infrastructure. So I'll just be interested in the outward approach to all of this.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you, Owen. Well, it would have been fine if walk from the question to the answer, but what we'll sort of try to do here is from the answer to the question. What I mean is that I would have been very happy if policy, was the first thing we started with. But I know if we do that, it was going to drag. Okay, so there was a college. Okay, the Harvard operates the colleges system. Okay, so we have a college, the College of Science. Okay, who are very passionate about getting their journals online, and in the process, they came to the library, seeking opinion. Okay, and in that process, we looked at what they had done, and we actually saw that the journal was online. when we assessed the journal and the platform they used, we understood, we needed to realize that we were not really going to go far, using WordPress, for journal management. And some of them also are very much aware, but so they ask what are the things they needed. So in the process, all of these, things, came out. The journal management system, the DOI, okay, and all of those things. So from there, they pursued it. But as we're pursuing it, we're also trying to do it on the other hand, as an institutional thing, okay, such that other journals in the system can actually, come on board the platform. So that was what, we did. We had highly planned that in the library, but to drive it, to management, for approval and all of those things, it was dragging until that particular college came with their need, so it was a need-based approach, okay, sort of. So we were able to achieve that. And the financing, DOIs, okay, it was the college also, like I say, they really had to drive. They wanted to achieve that success. We're only, helpful to facilitate it. So they were ready to go out, to supply the resources, the financial resources for it. But what we are doing now, okay, at the level of the library is to recoup what they have invested as a college, because other colleges are now using this platform. And at the point of registration, we didn't register as College of Science. We register as an institution, okay, as Akura University, such that anybody, any organization within the system can use what we did. So, so what we are doing now, the management is quite aware, and we are trying to get them back what they had spent, okay, and the management takes over the payment of dues.
That's interesting. And I think then as well, Idu, because I see you as one of our champions in Nigeria, then we also need to be looking at how we can get consortia together, so that, the more there are, then maybe the cheaper some of this becomes. And then, as Nabil had mentioned in his presentation, some more access to systems that might not have if we don't come together as a consortium. So I'm very keen as well, as part of our own advocacy and evangelism and actual capacity building, to actually have physical workshops specifically around specific PIDs. As you can see, 2 hours can't do justice to talking about DOIs from a technical use case and commercial perspective, and similarly as well for ORCID. So we need to try and see if we can run lots of physical workshops where we can actually get institutions in a particular region together and actually do more physical workshops to promote the knowledge and awareness. I don't know how that sounds with you.
That's very interesting. I'm very much open to that. So it is important, because if you look around, most of the donors in the country, we are far behind when it comes to the issue of PIDs, especially the DOI. I'm not sure we'll be able to count up to 10 donors that successfully implemented the DOI.
And even as well with researcher IDs as well, it's the same kind of thing. The people may not even have, and those that have are not really optimizing them. But if we can actually now define and articulate the benefits and use cases so that these can be adopted, and can create these necessary consortium, because it's of benefits to us, and I think we can move forward. So certainly Eko-Konnect, based on everything we discussed as well yesterday, we're going to try to engage with many institutions, and for other attendees as well who want to know more and want to get involved in pilot activities, then as we've said in other sessions, please do reach out to us so that we can, we need more champions, more advocates, and more use cases so we can actually increase the uptake. And also, as we can see, our funders are doing great things. Our funders do have money, but we need to be able to approach our funders to make sure they have some strategy behind how they're actually funding, because at the moment, it would just seem they're kind of giving out funding in a, I wouldn't let me not say haphazard, that would be too harsh, but they need to have some informed strategies about how they fund. And again, leveraging some of the paid architectures and technologies and models that exist could even make funding better available to our researchers to do their work and assess impact. So on that note, because it's nearly 3:30, we do have to round up. I would like to thank yourself, Idowu, Nabil, and Lombe for your presentations. Obviously, Lombe and Nabil, I think clearly we're going to be working with you, of course, as a recipient of one of the grants that Lombe spoke about. And of course, we're very keen anyway. It's been our strategy to see how we can promote the adoption of researcher IDs and how we can integrate these with the kind of solutions that are kind of growing in different areas. So we look at a kind of holistic or harmonizing strategy where we can incorporate and integrate all of this great infrastructure and look at how policy can drive this deployment and capacity building for the awareness. So obviously, we're going to actually get more granular with how we're going to be doing that this year. And we had said as well that we do need to really approach our funders. They need to be taking on board a lot of this stuff because they need this kind of infrastructure for not only awarding grants, but also being able to measure the impact of grants that they award, and they need paid infrastructure to do that. So there was really a lot to talk about. Over the coming weeks and months, we're going to set up more specific webinars as well as physical workshops around the country. But for now, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. We've really overrun. Thank you to everyone for being here. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have our last session. It's kind of different. It's a community-based session where we're going to talk about Earth observations and geographical information systems and how our students on campus can leverage these technologies to help to improve collection of weather data and storage and systems that improve weather analysis. And this is something we want to drive through the use of citizen science, where we can use affordable tools to help NIMET and other big weather organizations to collect data that can be used for weather forecasting, food security, and addressing climate change issues. So that should be an exciting session tomorrow. So on that note, I'd like to say once again, thank you to everyone for being here. Again, special thanks to Nabil and Lombe from South Africa, and look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. So now just have a great evening, and God bless.